But how do you solve not being an imposter, not feeling like a fraud as an entrepreneur, like I just said? All right, so exactly what are we talking about today? We are talking about how to stop feeling like a fraud for entrepreneurs. So if you are an entrepreneur and you ever feel like a fraud when you're doing stuff, or if you are just in your workplace or in life, this pertains to you too. So let me explain to you exactly what I mean, because I was asking some people inside of my private group, Video Marketing for Entrepreneurs. I'm not going to call the people out, but they said such things as, well, my family doesn't believe in me. My family doesn't support me. I'm going at this alone. I had people private message me to tell me how they related about this. And I know it can be hard as an entrepreneur. It's not an easy path because there's really no instruction booklet that will take you on the path to show you how to do this. So it can be frustrating. It can be hard. And I know everyone wants to be acknowledged for what they're doing. You want the support of your friends and your family and your peers, but sometimes you just don't get it. But the problem that leads to is that you also start messing with your own head. And we're going to talk more about that in just a moment. So let me just move this in front of me again. And like I said, we are talking today about how to stop feeling like a fraud for entrepreneurs. But it's not just for entrepreneurs, it's for everyone, because we all feel this. So let me first tell you how you mess with yourself. Because you start thinking about this and you overthink it. And sometimes we are our own worst enemy. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to be your own worst enemy. But unfortunately, a lot of us, that's exactly what happens. We start to have our own inner thoughts and our inner voice. And I got to be honest, you will say things to yourself that you would never, well, hopefully you would never say in person to another person, but you tend to in your own mind. So I'm going to give you a quick little story out of my own life and see if you can relate. Years ago, I had to do a recording job as a recording engineer, and I was all excited, couldn't sleep the night before. So I got up, left, got there early, tried to set everything up that I needed to do. The clients came in, work started. And that recording session was just terrible. It was a flop. And it made me stop and think, man, am I really in the right business? Did I really pick the right vocation? I like doing this, but that last session was terrible. I just don't know if I really should be doing this. Maybe this is not for me and I'm not cut out for this. Okay. See, that's you messing with you. Following week, we return, same client, and I'm got to apologize for what's going on to find out that before I got there, the studio was having problems with their equipment. And I was unaware. So here I am trying to use equipment that I know how to use, but it wasn't working properly. And what had happened was I doubted my own competency when in fact I was doing everything fine. It wasn't me. It was the equipment. So what happens is you will doubt your own self even though you have everything that you need to do whatever it is that you're trying to do properly. So I want to tell you of another term this goes under, and let me just move this down. And another term that this goes under is imposter syndrome. That one you may have heard of, okay, because that one is more of a prevalent term. The problem that I don't like with that term, though, is the word syndrome, because it makes it feel like this is an isolated event. It only happens to a small group of people. And that's not the case. I want to let you know this is a universal thing. We all feel this, okay? All of us. It doesn't matter if you're a high achiever. It doesn't matter if you you have good grades, bad grades. Whatever it is, you always question yourself. And you come up with this, wow, am I good enough? Should I really be doing this? I mean, I see other people doing these things and they're succeeding. Why am I not succeeding? Okay. And I'm going to tell you a fancy term. Let me just type it out. And I want to give props where props is due. I learned this from Elizabeth Cox, and the term is pluralistic ignorance. Now, what does that mean? All right, it's a phenomenon we all experience, and it's basically what I've been telling you so far. What it means is that we doubt ourselves privately, internally. We think to ourselves, we're not good enough. We don't know what we're doing. I shouldn't be doing this. Okay? But because we believe that we are alone in thinking this way, and no one else voices their doubts, you create this loop. So let me try to explain that another way. Wow. Like my example in the studio. Wow, you know, I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I knew how to work this console, but it really isn't working, and I don't really think I should be in this. Maybe I should think of another vocation. Maybe I should do something else. Man, I really don't know if I should be doing this. Now, you think that to yourself, but you don't say it out loud. And it makes you feel like you shouldn't be doing these things. And then, like I said with my example, next day I found out that the studio equipment wasn't any good. So it wasn't my fault. It was the studio equipment. So I knew what I was doing. So how do you solve this? Okay, let's write that down. How do you solve not feeling like a fraud or imposter? Real simple, and this is exactly why I wanted to do this stream for you. And how you solve this is exactly what we're doing right now. We're talking about it. And just the mere fact of talking about it and finding out from someone else that, hey, they too experience this. They experience the same things that you do. Just might be in a different context, but they feel the same way you do. And you'd be surprised. You could think your professor in college, who you might admire, does no wrong, doesn't make mistakes, to find out that, yeah, they too sometimes feel like they're an imposter, that maybe they shouldn't be doing this, that maybe they should be doing something else, they should look for another life's calling. Meanwhile, you think they're the best professor in the world. But when you find out from someone else that you admire or you look up to that they experience the same trials and tribulations you're going through, it helps to ease this. So I want you to know, just like I shared with you a part out of my life, you have skills, you have abilities, and you are competent enough to do the things that you're set out to do. Just don't let yourself get in your own head, because that's what we tend to do a lot. It's just something that we seem to do on a regular basis, where, in other words, you can never turn off just your head. You know, you can't turn off your mind, you can't turn off your thinking, but we tend to say things negatively to ourselves, about ourselves, And sometimes we are our own worst enemy. But how do you solve not being an imposter, not feeling like a fraud as an entrepreneur, like I just said? Just talk to someone about it. And you'd be surprised to find out that, guess what? They have the same fears. They have the same trials and tribulations, just like you. So I wanted to do this to make you aware of what was happening. I wanted you to know you are good enough. Okay? And to borrow a phrase from Jacqueline, you are worthy. I wanted to talk to you about it because I know some people, a lot of people, they don't have anyone to talk to about these things. So this repetition just goes on and on and on in their head. And they talk themselves out of things that they really shouldn't. Don't let that be you. You have skills, you have abilities, you matter. I'll give you one last example. It's one that was told to me years ago when I was studying to be a recording engineer, and it's stuck in my head ever since. Imagine the Beatles. We're choosing the Beatles because they're pretty well universally known. But imagine the Beatles are in a record store, which there are not very many of those anymore, if there still are. But let's go with it for sake of argument. They're in a record store and they pull out, they're looking for their own album. They find their very first release and they're like, wow, we finally did it. We made a record. And then they stop and think to themselves, but you know what? Other people are making the same kind of music that we want to make. You know, the Rolling Stones, they're not too different from us. And they're kind of popular as well. You know what? Maybe we shouldn't make music anymore. Think for a moment how the world would be different. How your world would be different if the Beatles never made another song ever. All because they got inside of their own head, feeling like a fraud and an imposter and a imposter. Can't talk today. This is why I like to do live streams. So you can see that I make mistakes and I'm human. They feel like an imposter and they feel like a fraud. Imagine how the world would be different today because of that. Don't do this. Do not get in your head, your own head, and turn things off. Okay? I know things may go bad. I know not everything's going to go well, but take a step back, take a breather, because like, look at the example I gave you. At the moment that I was doing this for this client in the studio, I didn't know that the equipment was bad. I thought it was me. So I was frantically trying to fix everything as best as I could. And yes, since I didn't know, I had a really bad feeling that day. I felt bad for the client. I felt like it was my fault. And it made me second guess everything that I knew how to do. But when I came back the next day and found out that the equipment was bad, that made me say, oh, you know what? I knew what I was doing. When I touched this machine and set in the settings that I was doing and everything, I knew it should have worked the way I set it up to, but it just wasn't doing it because it wasn't my fault. It was the equipment. So I just want to have this talk with you again so that you knew you're not alone. And how do you solve feeling like an imposter? Just what we're doing right now. Just have a talk with somebody, or like I'm doing with you, just watch this video, listen, and know you're not alone.